Hi, and welcome to episode 4 of Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise. Man, if you're just joining us now, you've got 3 chapters to catch up on. And if you're joining us for the 4th episode, you have no doubt found yourself equipped and stronger and a little bit more capable of challenging fascism right now. You know, as we look at the news right now, I am constantly reminded of how much the United States of America has changed in my lifetime. And one of the things I often tell people is quite simply, it has not always been this way, and it does not have to be this way going forward. We're so happy that you've joined us through episodes 1 through 3. Today's episode is very special. And I think it's really relevant. We're going to talk a lot about how you practically apply that. Today, earlier, we recorded for the studio here, episode 4, and then we're going to go into the extended session tonight. So this is recorded live on our show, Rebel Radio. Rebel Radio broadcasts live on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitch every other night at 8:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, where we have actually built this toolkit, Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise. But let's kick into, we're going to go through this episode 4 and then into the extended session. So without further ado, welcome to episode 4. You are not ready to fight fascism. You are not ready to fight fascism. And it's not because we haven't covered all of the relevant examples of how and when you should use local community to rise up and cause actual and tangible change. That has nothing to do with what I'm talking about right now. No, you are not ready to fight fascism because you have not been taking good care of yourself. And I'm not telling you this to judge you. I'm telling you this because, or I have some kind of like holier than thou bullshit attitude about mental wellness. In fact, quite the contrary. I am telling you this because if you're listening to this episode, and I know you know this about yourself, you're the kind of person that has the outlook on life that is it's causing you a lot of stress and strain. It really does seem right now, if you look all around, whether that's the United States or globally, that the bad guys are winning. So here's the real truth about your mental state. You have a natural sense of justice, and that is exactly why you're listening to Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise, because you're not sure what practical, actual, and tactical steps to take to fight fascism. We are covering those, to be very clear, at least as many as I know, and we are actually developing them live in the moment. We are going to continue to give you the tools to search and research other tools to find. But the reason you in particular, are not fighting fascism and you are not ready to fight fascism is that you have not been taking good care of yourself. And the numbers don't lie. Did you know in 2024, 43% of US adults reported feeling more anxious than the previous year? At the time of our recording this podcast, it is definitely going to be much higher. A full 23% of Americans experienced a mental health condition in the past year. 90% of Americans lost sleep because of their own worries about their health and or the economy. And 23% of the population almost always loses sleep during to money worries. Now, the stress that has, that can have a significant impact on your immune system, especially if it's chronic. Stress reduces the number of what we call natural killer cells in your body, the ones you need to fight viruses. Under sustained long-term stress, you can develop cardiovascular problems, gastric ulcers, and be at greater risk for many conditions, not to mention further mental decline. There is a constant, pervasive, seemingly never-ending onslaught of negative news and distressing information. The very fabric of our society is under real, sustained, and actual threat. In spite of what many people are willing to say, that core threat to your personal safety is a factual reason that you can be, and indeed are, stressed. Financial strain, of course, makes it worse. I'm going to step out of the recording. I really want you to absorb what I'm about to tell you right now. The least financially secure Americans are far more likely to opt out of the political system altogether. The very system they need to be better. 94% of financially secure Americans were registered to vote in 2014. Compare that with only 54% of the least financially secure who were registered to vote. Only 28% of workers have said they could find a comparable job where they could discuss politics. So, in other words, you can't even talk about politics at work. I think everybody knows that. But here's what they don't tell you: participating in protests or actions to resist fascism can be and are extremely psychologically taxing. You're dealing with post-traumatic stress. Statistics are very clear about this. The prevalence of probable major depression in areas where protests happen is increased as much as 7%. To step out of the recording here. So when we think about Los Angeles or Washington, D.C., those people, those citizens experiencing that are experiencing significantly higher rates of depression, anxiety, mental strain. But that's not you, is it? You're actually pulling down a much stronger and much more sustained stress load. You're most likely following the news much more closely than your neighbors, and you're much more attuned to that information. I tell you this not because I have to constantly remind myself to exercise self care. I say this unironically because one of my biggest and most prevalent activism sort of awakenings has been mental wellness. To step out of the recording again, I have been a lifetime activist for mental wellness. It's been one of the most important causes of my lifetime. And because that is so important to me, it's not unironic that I'm here talking about this. But, you know, I do say this with a level of irony because something happened to me in 2024 that really changed the course of my activism in my life. In the summer of 2024, I was in a very serious car accident that seriously and significantly impacted my life. That physical disruption, the depression, the anxiety, it caused me to tune out of almost everything. But through my physical self care and recovery, and through my mental self care and recovery, I eventually found myself on a path that led me to a fundamental understanding of who I am. I learned, as a result, I'm autistic. And I am grateful because if not for that extremely traumatic event, I would never have found myself on the path to getting the kind of care that I actually needed to eventually unlock that part of myself that really fundamentally changed who I was as an activist. I never fully understood how all of these things wove together until I discovered and I understood that I was autistic and that my special interest was literally saving democracy. And you're going to have your own reasons for this. You're going to have your own attachment to justice. It could be because you're a fundamentally great person. It could be because you experienced trauma. It could be because you want to make the world a better place. The message I'm trying to land, and let me please land the plane, is that I wasted years of my life not being an effective community activist because I did not actually understand who I was. I didn't know. I didn't know who I was. So when I finally understood who and what I was, how my brain worked, it made so much more sense to me. It changed how I look at and approach the world. Many people know this, but autistic and neurodivergent individuals tend to have much stronger attachments to justice. And damn, I have a very strong attachment to justice. But because I wasn't taking care of my mental health, I didn't realize that was who I am. And not just as people would tell me that I'm an asshole. I wasn't an asshole. I was autistic and I cared about democracy. I do care about democracy. And I thought I was well tuned to my own mental well-being, my own mental health. But you know what? I was fundamentally wrong. And the approaches I took, they were wrong because of this. The same is true with how I applied that to my activism. I approached it from a fundamentally wrong approach. You are not ready to fight fascism because the deck is stacked against you. In times of mass protest or police violence, you will be taxed mentally to a degree you have not encountered, even if you have dealt with your own mental wellness before. The rise of authoritarianism will necessitate the rise of police state tactics, police action, militarized action, and yes, police violence. You will have to be mentally prepared to respond in a safe and legal way. And if you are mentally taxed, you will fail. During my activism, I really learned this the hard way. I evolved into something that I would probably say I wasn't proud of. I was probably pretty bitter. I was really prone to attack. Maybe you could call that self defense mode or they started it strategy, but it really doesn't matter. I was very angry. The process of being an activist was not like I thought it would be. I thought I was fighting for access at every turn. I wasn't getting fair coverage in the media. I was just trying to get the chance to share my ideas and my message. At one point, my exhaustion led me to not even be able to open my eyes. I was so tired, I was nauseous. And the diagnosis I got, by the way, exhaustion. I got an IV. I was ordered to rest. You know, that rest happened to come at exactly the worst time when I thought my activism was most important. I can say that I wish I had taken better care of myself, but every path, every cobblestone in the road that got me here for a reason. These are the lessons you can only see going backwards. But let's continue. The authoritarian playbook. Taking yourself out of the constant news cycle is helpful and essential. The strategy of authoritarianism is to overwhelm you and to trigger all of the things we started this chapter with, to make you anxious, depressed, and to cause you to freeze. There's a phenomenon called learned helplessness. In the original experiment, they took a dog and placed it in a room and subjected it to electronic shocks from multiple quadrants of the room. That dog became overwhelmed by this constant assault and shock, and eventually the dog just laid in the corner and sat down and allowed the electronic shocks to continue. You are being shocked constantly. The overarching lesson and challenging is simple. You need to detach and make sure you're giving yourself time to be mentally well. I'm going to share several strategies here that are helpful for me, but I could easily write an entire book just on this one topic. So let's get into it. Are you ready? First, create and find joy. This is not optional. My first and most prevalent piece of advice for you is to continue to create and find joy in something. Creative thinking is a fundamental weapon to use against fascism. Indeed, fascism and authoritarianism require the suppression of critical thinking. It's why they attack the media. It is why they go at universities. It is why they seek to change dialogue to an uneducated way. My biggest source of refreshment and energy is to create and make art, whether that's through spoken word or photography, or sketching on my notebook during Rebel Radio, or recording this podcast. It's been a journey. So the first challenge here is my real challenge to you to continue to do things that bring you joy, to find and continue to seek out and look for moments of joy and beauty in life. Number 2, put your fucking phone down. The second is digital wellness. And again, an area I'm not always the best at, but you need to manage your news consumption and curate your social media. You need to start practicing digital detox. Having your phone on you is causing you stress and strain, and it is making you a less effective activist. One of the things I do and I encourage people to do is to take literal time away from your phone. If you can, don't sleep with your phone. When we talk about InfoSec, information security, and OPSEC, operational security, in future episodes of Ignite, we'll actually talk about things about how you can physically put security in place or to physically remove yourself, for example, using what we would call a dumb phone. But one of the things I do every night before Rebel Radio is I go on a walk. I specifically leave my phone behind. To do this, I have to make a safety plan so that people know where I'm going and where to find me, but I do leave the phone, and that has changed me for the better. So, stepping out of the recording, what I will do is I will say, for example, hey, if I'm not home by 9 o'clock, make sure you're checking in, make sure you're checking my location, that kind of thing. Back into the recording. Turn off the news. Maybe you can get your news from reading the news instead of Instagram or TikTok. Perhaps you could actually subscribe to your local newspaper. Indeed, if you're talking about how you can fight fascism, supporting a local newspaper is one of the most powerful ways that you can do that. Number 3, exercise and meditation. Listen, I know this is a challenging topic for many people. I'm not always the best advocate for you here, but practicing a balanced diet is essential and something you should challenge yourself to. I'm a healthier and better person because my wife encourages, I would say forces me to eat better. And I'm a profound fan of both exercise and meditation. It's literally changed my life and it's made me a better activist. Before I find myself in a situation where confrontation could be high, I make sure to take time to meditate, to plan and strategize every possible interaction. And let me tell you, something we'll talk about shortly, it has actually saved me from arrest. Number 4, embrace community, even if you don't like people. This last part, which is admittedly the most difficult, has been my most fundamental awakening, embracing your sense of community. As someone who is autistic, as we discussed, and who I generally do not enjoy interacting face to face, I can say that I've been a very effective activist, but that activism has largely been alone. It was not until the rise of authoritarianism in the United States that I finally understood that my most essential tool that I needed to sharpen was my sense of physical community. We'll talk about this more in the extended session. During my time in activism, I've met with hundreds of local officials, county commissioners in small towns, city council members in big cities, school board trustees, and most of these people got into local government because they were frustrated about something specific and no one else was willing to do anything about it. We will talk about how I did that and how you can apply those same tools. But for everyone who runs for office, there are hundreds of people who just complain. And complaining is fine. I do a lot of complaining myself, but complaining without action is just noise. The challenge for you now is you have to build community, even if that has been hard for you in the past. And it has been hard for me to learn how to build community. But if I can learn, you can learn as well. If you're not sure how to do that, I would encourage you to join us at Rebel Radio every other night at 8:30 p.m. We actually show people how to do just this, and we've created a space where thousands of people feel like they're welcome and they belong. To be honest, we are all learning as we go, and you will learn as you go. It's not about being perfect. It's about finding community and connection. But the bottom line, you are not ready to fight fascism yet, but now you understand more how to get ready. The authoritarian wants you overwhelmed. They want you exhausted and they want you alone. They want you to believe that resistance is futile and that your individual actions do not matter. By taking care of yourself and building community, you are by definition challenging fascism. You are refusing to let them break your spirit. Now, in episode 5, I will demonstrate in a profound way how to start to translate this into tactical action. But remember, none of the tactics we teach you will be sustainable or effective if you haven't first done the work we just talked about. And again, this is not about being perfect. This is about being prepared. This is about being effective. It is about being ready when the moment comes to act. And my friends, that moment is coming. Thanks for joining us on episode 4 of Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise. We're now going to continue to the extended session. For those of you just joining or downloading this podcast in your favorite platform, I wanted to give you a special surprise. We have decided, as we've launched this podcast, because of the effectiveness and the success, to give the extended session for free for all listeners of the podcast for the first 12 episodes. And the reason is because I really wrangled with that decision. I truly believe that everyone needs to have access to the tools necessary to fight authoritarianism. So for the first 12 episodes, you can have the extended session at no charge. If you want to support our efforts and what we do, there's many ways that you can do that. The first is, of course, listening to the podcast. But if you'd like to support us, you can consider joining the community, joining us on Rebel Radio, or purchasing a Resist-A-Cat sticker from our support store. Let's go ahead and take a pause and go into the extended session of episode 4 of Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise. Well, hello. Welcome to this extended session of Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise. This is episode 4. And in episode 4, we're really focusing on mental wellness, specifically the fact that you will not be able to fight fascism if you are not taking time to take care of yourself. We covered a lot of those reasons and a lot of the sort of back end, the sort of data behind that. But I think aside from the very clear data, one of the big takeaways for me was realizing and recognizing, for example, Washington, D.C. or Los Angeles, understanding that those community members, people who we care about, were not thinking about the post-traumatic stress and long-term mental wellness decline that they are going to experience from this ongoing strain. I bring that up because it is important for us to put those pieces together now. One of the ways that you can help is, for example, if you know someone in Los Angeles or Washington, D.C., or in a town coming near you, Chicago is an example. Can you or could you connect with individuals in those communities to help apply the actual lesson from today, to help them find mental wellness, a space to talk, a space to connect? Could you say to them this exact sentence? I know that having troops in your town makes you feel anxious, afraid, nervous. I know you know that as well, but I'm not sure that you're aware that you are going to need to process through that. So I just want to let you know that I'm here for you if you do. That one sentence, well, it's a couple sentences, that could change someone's life. So it's a lesson here from the extended session, but it's something that I really took to heart. So let's kick into some of the questions we had during the live recording of the show today. We do record this podcast live, and then we do have, and it is formed from our live radio show, Rebel Radio, which broadcasts at 8:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time every other night. One of the first questions from the afternoon session was challenging me to answer more specifically when I had said in this chapter that meditation and planning and strategizing had prevented, for example, my being arrested. So let me first start and talk about that. What I mean specifically, tactically, is something we talked about in the chapter, which is police violence, the use of police force is designed to trigger you. People use that word really lightly, but that is exactly what it's designed to do. It's designed to push you because the state has the ability and the authority to use violence against you in ways that you can simply not reciprocate. Because of this, you are constantly pushed against the wall of action response, action response. On Rebel Radio, we talk about the police tactic of kettling. Most people don't know what kettling is, but kettling, it has many forms, but kettling is when you're at a protest and the police corner you into, by advancing on you, an area from which you cannot escape. This is a particularly effective anti-protest strategy because as the police march against you, you are essentially prohibited from moving forward because that will cause you to contact them. And then you're kettled into a place from which you cannot escape. Number one, that's a very stressful situation, obviously. Number two, it can be avoided if you're aware of what's happening to you. You will be most aware if you have sharpness, clarity, and focus. So what I mean to say is before I find myself in an act of civil disobedience or protest or going to, for example, a city council meeting where I'm going to speak or challenge my representatives, I take time to breathe, meditate, and I plan out how I intend it to go. I strategize and visualize. I plan out what I intend to happen, what outcomes could happen, the best case and the worst case scenario. That's something that you should consider trying as well. I have been in the room with people doing almost essentially and exactly the same thing, resisting, for example, the police. And my preparedness, my mental sharpness and clarity allowed me to exit that exact scenario and to leave and go home when they ended up spending the night in jail. And it's because I took the time to mentally focus and prepare. And it is an essential lesson. It's something people simply don't talk about, but it is important. As we find ourselves on the street more, we have to be mentally sharp and prepared to challenge and to resist that police violence. And you can only do that if you have your wits about you. We'll talk more about protest readiness in future episodes. But for today, the lesson here is be sharp, be present, be calm, and strategize. The next session I wanted to land was something that came up in the live reading of episode 4. Someone had hopped up on TikTok and had addressed a very real and present situation, which was the question they had. And I'm summarizing here, but the question and statement they had was really this version: I'm having doubts if I am doing enough.
Hey. So I'm really new. I think this is my third time joining you guys, but thanks for letting me come up and speak. Um, so I was in behavioral health and mental health services before last November. I became physically disabled. Got hit with a super rare condition, and I am no longer mobile like I used to be. So one of my biggest struggles has been kind of accepting like what I can do now, even if it's just sharing TikToks and being here and sharing parts of my story is enough. And I think a lot of people, for different reasons, have that same experience. Like, am I doing enough? And I just wanted to come up here and say that this is why this community that you're building is so important, because never can one person do it alone. We have to find that community and rely on each other and know that the impact that we can make, even if it's just one person. I think the first night I was in here, someone came up and shared about helping one person. If you can reach one, that is more than enough. It trickles. It's a domino effect. And the more positivity that we add, the better things will get for everybody.
This particular guest had shared their own individual health journey, which had declined over the last year specifically. And they had found themselves in a place of self doubt because they were physically unable to be as present in some of this engagement as they physically were able to be in the past. And that individual found themselves asking the question, am I doing enough? And what I hope you learn from this individual is actually how they rose to the moment of asking that question. Number one, being courageous enough to say something like that out loud is a true act of resistance. But number two, this guest also highlighted for us how she and how you could take place, stand place, and hold the line, even if you're not able to physically do that, or even if you are not in a condition, say, for health purposes where you could. She talked about how she was using the internet to connect with people, to connect, for example, with Rebel Radio, to help create digital material, to help communicate digitally. And let me tell you, that is as important. If you are supporting a group of resistance members, for example, who go to a protest and who get arrested, you may become an essential part of helping get them out of jail by helping track down where they are, what facility they're in, connecting them with people in bail support services, and helping make sure, for example, their families know where they are. These are all things you can do from I hate to use the word safety because none of us are really safe at this time, but those are things you could do when a physical limitation may have prevented you from doing that. But the action itself, I want to point out, is not as powerful as the courage to acknowledge the challenge. Most people are not courageous enough to acknowledge that kind of challenge really comes at them. So now we'll go ahead and take another live question from the show in this extended session.
But I wanted to address another topic. I have a small child. She's 2. Some things were brought up to me today because everyone knows I can't be quiet. Like I don't know if this resonates with anyone else. I feel it in every fiber of my bones that this is where I'm supposed to be. That I've never been able to not stand up for what I believe is right. I can't shut up about it. And my family is extremely scared that it's going to get to a point of where, things are at jeopardy with, my child. She's mixed. She has a very, very, she has a middle name that I'm not going to share her full name, but her middle name, and it's getting to the point where we're thinking we should change that.
Yes.
And where my mom's even scared that she's not going to be able to see my daughter in the event of something were to happen to me. Of course, me and my spouse have talked over this, and absolutely that would never happen. But someone was saying having plans is the best way to kind of feel mentally at ease. And I agree to some extent. I don't think you're ever going to get rid of all your anxiety. I think that you just kind of have to sit in it and realize that your fears are valid, but push forward.
Yeah. I think that's a solid piece of advice. I'm it's you're sharing a lot of really hyper valuable information. I think your experience of having a child who has a name that is Hispanic, right? But that's
Yes.
what we're talking about.
Yes.
However you want to say that is not a foreign experience. Pardon the terminology there, but I think a lot of people. What you highlighted is there's a lot of people who thought this would never come to their doorstep.
Yeah.
And in your example, maybe family members who literally voted against, now you're learning, not just your interest, but your child's interest, right? And who are sort of spectators to this is not meant to be against your family, but who are sort of anxious spectators to your choosing to resist. They're kind of that is what you described.
Yeah, that's what's
They're sort of anxiously spectating and perhaps choosing not to advocate for you or your family at this
They've
time.
asked me why I can't just be quiet, and
Yeah, it happens a lot. Yeah, that was what I was hoping. Yeah,
I
that
can't.
was that's what people needed to hear. A lot of people have heard that from their family. So
Like,
thank
I
you for saying that.
literally can't. Like, it's a sensitive subject, and I almost cry every time I get on it. I know I can't.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? Why do you think you can't? Why do you think that is?
My whole life has always been about standing up for what I believe is right and standing up for what I see is wrong. And I just, for me, not to speak up, it almost physically hurts to an
Well,
extent.
wait though. Well, wait, because you have a core family unit who doesn't feel that way. So what do you think it is?
My family has hated me my whole life. I've always been kind of the black sheep. It's also why a lot of the violence was perpetuated on me within my childhood. It's because I couldn't not speak up.
A lot of people though understand that core experience as sort of being the black sheep of the family, um, which ultimately for most people just means that like you're courageous and right. I'll just point that out. But that's a tough place to be in. I do think there's something to pull out there though, because to be in a family group, as you've described, and to be essentially one of the only people in that family group that walks away from that experience of saying like, well, I'm going to advocate for people less fortunate. I'm not going to just shut up. I'm not just going to be quiet. Like, I think there's something to pull out of that. There really is. I don't know that I can land that for you tonight. I'm gonna put some thought into that actually, but it does really matter. I think a lot of people have heard what you just said, which is why can't you just be quiet? A lot of people have heard that. A lot of people have heard that.
I'm
And
extremely grateful I got lucky because that's the situation of my circumstance. A lot of this is based on luck. I've been homeless before when I was 17 and 18 when I got kicked out and was trying to get back on my feet. Um, and so I've kind of experienced that. And whenever I got pregnant is actually when we got the camper, and we were lucky to have gotten it for a, s- a really good deal. And we got the camper because it's a for certain always like it's a for certain home always over our daughter's house like head. And when we upgrade, we plan to keep the camper and renovate it and always keep it for her. And so she will always have a home no matter what.
Okay, so in the live show tonight, this late night recording, someone hopped up and reminded us of something I think really present, which is that many of us, in fact, I would say probably most of the people listening to this podcast, did grow up in a time when it was actually different, and we talked about that in the beginning of the show too, which is it has not always been this way in terms of our political discourse, but it also has not always been this way in terms of the constant need to have access and connectivity. In the actual reading, we talked about putting your phone down, getting away from your actual phone. I want to share a little bit of a story about that as well. The person who hopped up on the show reminded us all that prior to a smartphone or even cell phones, if you've kind of remembered that era, or dial up internet, you actually had to work much harder to find information to connect. The first job I ever had, as an example, I got it from a newspaper. The want ads in a newspaper. The world has changed so deeply now, and I think that's a really good example of that. My today example, though, would be from September 1st, the date we're recording this program. We were long overdue for a family activity, and so what we did is we actually went to see the movie Superman. And we went to see Superman in the theaters today. It's been out for a long time, but we finally got to go see it today. And I purposely left my phone at home today. I did that because I don't often get that time to spend with my family where it's just us. And I'm always on my phone and I'm always checking something or clicking something or doing something like that. But I was able to just leave the phone at home. Now, obviously, one of us brought a phone with so that we could make sure everything was okay. But I gotta tell you, not having to click on an app or check the phone, it allowed me to be more present with my family in the moment. And we all need more of that. And I feel like a much more powerful man as a result of them. So it's part of the challenge, part of the solution as well. Okay, well, that was interesting. So, for future episodes of the show, as we enhance our technology, we'll try to have the live recordings of people when they come up on the show and ask the question. It's also a matter of like, do people want to be on a podcast? But for our last caller of the night on Rebel Radio, as we prepared episode 4, we had someone come up and talk about their individual challenges and struggles with poverty, as well as their own family dynamics. And they brought up something that people often mention to me, which is they find themselves in a family situation where people are saying, "Hey, with everything that's happening now, why can't you just stay quiet? Why do you have to fight against fascism?" And as it pertains to mental health, I think that's such a relevant call out that she made. And what this particular guest pointed out to us was they have this deep connection to doing the right thing, a deep connection to showcasing for their child the safety of family, the safety of community, and the safety of being a strong moral compass. And that can only happen when you have solid mental wellness. I asked this particular caller the question, "How would you rate your mental health?" And she unquestionably and confidently said, "I'm the best that I have ever been." And so, in spite of great challenge, in spite of a great assault on her own mental wellness, and really in spite of a lack of support system from her family, she has chosen to find a place and a space to keep her family safe at this time, to resist and to grow and to be a positive mental wellness role model for her child and really for the rest of us. And what I think that reminds me of is everything that we've built here, both in Ignite, fighting fascism in the age of its rise, in our Rebel Radio community, And that is to say the following. We are all, whether you're a millionaire or you work 12 hours a day, we are all much closer to, someone who is unhoused trying to find a place to sleep tonight than we will ever be to a billionaire like Elon Musk. But at the end of the day, I will not take my wealth with me when I leave. Neither will Elon Musk. Neither will anyone who called into the show tonight. And I think the ultimate question then is not so much how much money did we make, but is how did we impact those around us? How do we make them better? How do we make them safer? How did we leave them as a better human being? Well, you can only do that if you focus on yourself, if you make yourself the strongest, most resilient person possible. And that's what we covered today in episode 4. Thank you so much for joining us and for listening to this extended session. We'll be back next week with episode 5, which is a very special episode indeed. We'll see you then, and thanks for joining.